then the thing that really sets me off is, well, once we have a vaccine, then everything will go back to normal.
Yeah.
And I say, you mean like the flu vaccine that's 8% effective?
Doesn't work.
If I had a brake pad manufacturing company for cars and my brake pads were 8% effective, I would be out of business.
George Floyd was not taken out because he was black. George Floyd was taken out because he was owed major drug money by Derek Chauvin.
You're making vaccines that are 8% effective for the flu that you have to change every year, which, by the way, give most people that take them the flu. And you're going to tell me that this new, and they can't sue, you can't sue them for this without going through the VAERS court, which is a joke. And you're going to tell me that once we have a untested, brand new rush through vaccine, then everything is going to go back to normal? Good luck with that. I tell you what, they're going to test it in Africa like they're doing, kill a bunch of Africans, pay them off $1,000 per person, which is the maximum that they have to spend if they kill somebody. So they already know that because it's way cheaper to kill them there than kill them here.
Found out what the Chinese Communist Party, the Red Dragon, is doing to these people and have been doing to these people for the last 20 years in China, sending hundreds and thousands of innocent Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghur Muslims, house Christians, and Tibetan Buddhists. Particularly 95% of the victims of Falun Gong practitioners to these state-mandated hospitals, concentration camps, death camps, military facilities run by the Chinese military at the behest of the highest-ranking officials of the Chinese Communist Party to create a legal, sanctioned, forced organ harvesting business.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas. I'm your host, Paul Aguilar. We really appreciate you guys stopping in. If you guys are watching us here on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as that bell icon so you don't miss a future episode. Also hit that thumbs up button as well. It would really help us out. If you guys are on the go, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio at Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys want to follow us on social media as well, you can find us on Twitter at Defender Podcast, Instagram at Truth Defender Podcast, as well as Facebook at The Truth Defender Podcast. Also, if you have any questions or concerns or any kind of comments for myself or our guests, if you have any guests or topic recommendations, you can email us at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. Today's guest is Mr. Leo Zagami. Leo Zagami is a writer and researcher who quickly became popular on the web in 2006. Without further ado, Mr. Leo Zagami, how are you doing today, sir?
Very well, very well. I'm glad to be on your show, even if we are having a little bit of problems, mostly because you're working from a platform that I deem a little bit dangerous for me, and every time I have anything to do with Zoom, even if myself I use StreamYard all the time, so I use Zoom very rarely, but every time I use it, I have the impression they're playing around with us. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, it feels like every time I have somebody on that they probably don't want to hear much of the information from, I always have issues as well. So I'm definitely going to have to try changing things up on my end as well. But no, I mean, we'll make do with what we can. Like I said, if you have any issues
of course,
just let me know. We'll get it sorted out for you.
No worry. Now, as I said, I don't know if it's the Chinese government that likes to play around with Zoom all the time that is doing it, or if it is because you have a problem with the bandwidth on Friday evening. Right. But it seems like you are it's very difficult to hear you on this side. I'm really sorry to say that because, of course.
No worries. No worries. No, yeah, it's probably, we're probably getting messed with here on our end, but let's take a look and see. Got everything working. Yeah. Just want to make sure.
As I said, this could be, of course, possible when you're dealing with the government like the Chinese government. I mean, earlier on, I was just doing a special on the life of Mao Zedong and all of his criminal activities, aside from how he actually raised to power. So,
right.
Unfortunately, I didn't use the Zoom for doing that. Otherwise, I would probably take a couple of minutes, let me
Right, right. No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
But it's good to hear you now a little bit more clearly from Texas, and of course, I appreciate what you're trying to do.
no, thank you. I appreciate your time. No, yeah. So, I mean, we just wanted to get here and I guess get started with obviously China and their entire role on what's happening in the world today. You know, we all know that the Chinese virus actually is not something that came up naturally, but it's actually man-made, you know, out of the labs from Wuhan. And we definitely know that it's not just something that happened by accident. You had the protesters that were in Hong Kong as well. Trump was actually bringing a lot of the factories and things like that back out of China, you know, back to America. Japan as well. You know, they were starting to leave China. I just wanted to kind of get your, you know, your thoughts on, I guess, China as a whole and what they're doing to the world nowadays.
Okay, China, well, it's a very complex matter that goes back over 100 years when the Republic of China was first formed, and that happened after a sort of revolt, and I'm not talking about the Boxers' revolt, I'm talking about the 1911 one. Because of that revolt, it kind of started the process whereby the dynasty that was in power got dethroned by the revolutionaries. The revolutionaries, though they were not actually communist, they were nationalist. Right. They became communist only after the Soviet Union started a gradual process that built up what became known as the Soviet Republic of China. And that happened in the 30s, and it happened with the help of the Soviet Union at a military and strategic level, so they could actually build a society that would reflect not only communism, but the Soviet style of communism. So it was almost a franchising. Now, what happened was it didn't really work out very well because in the end, the nationalists reclaimed the power and they cornered Mao and his followers for a brief time. But then he came back very strong with the help of the Soviet Union and managed to overtake the nationalists, but not only the nationalists. At that time, of course, behind the nationalists, there was a secret society, and as Tiantui or Hongmen, the society of the earth and the sky, more or less that's how you translate it. But it is one of the most ancient Illuminati of China secret societies that is born out of a legend that it all starts in a Shaolin monastery with the usual Shaolin monks and their Kung Fu arts. Of course, it is a legend, and it is a legend because what happens with Chinese Freemasonry is that there is a lot of confusion also with the regular Chinese Freemasonry. The regular Chinese Freemasonry was actually born in 1949 when Mao Zedong took power and forbid Freemasonry in mainland China. Then in Taiwan, which was the last remains of the Republic of China, it actually preserved and founded their first Grand Lodge that was recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England and by the regular network of Freemasonry. But instead, the other form of Freemasonry, the Chinese form of Freemasonry, that to this day is very influential worldwide and counts over 6 million members worldwide. Well, that form of Freemasonry was simply adopting the symbols of Freemasonry, but was in reality a very ancient secret society that was born to support the Ming dynasty. So it's very complex what we find in China, because then at one point the Chinese Freemasons of the Hongmen, they protect the city of Shanghai from the communists, but then they were not strong enough, of course, to protect it from the Japanese that were, of course, the enemy that at one point really made of China a place of conquest, if you remember Manchuria.
Right.
And so what happens here is that Mao eventually manages in 1949, after the Second World War, after Japan is defeated, of course, and we all know how. At that point, Mao, for a period, actually started having a relationship with the US government. Between 1944 and 1947, the US started what is known as the Dixon Mission. Now, the Dixon Mission is basically something that went on in a period of 3 years that didn't really manage to arrive to anything consistent, and proved to the Americans that it was almost impossible to convert in any way Mao Zedong and his revolutionaries to a form of democracy of any kind. And what happened instead is that there was, though, some Americans, left-wing Americans, from the very early days, even before Mao took control, and actually when he was in charge of the Soviet Republic of China, there was a guy very close to him, and this person very close to him basically became a sort of close advisor. And then in turn, in 1937, he wrote a book that I think was called Sky Over China or something like that. I just have to find it so I can be more correct with you on how it was entitled. But that was the first book really that gave an idea to the Americans of what was really going on inside China. Since the fall of the empire in 1911, 1912, there was confusion and there was not really any clear news of what was going on inside China. However, having said that, some Americans managed to get very close to Mao Zedong, but at in the one that I think is most known was a guy who met him by pure chance. He was trying to meet with the Chinese Red Army in a way to gather information for the American government, and then he managed to get closer and closer to Mao Zedong. So what happens here is that after 1947, so after the Americans tried a point of contact with Mao Zedong, the relationship broke. But many years later, actually 20 years later to be exact, Nixon made a statement in 1967 that he wanted to open up to China. Now, I think that was probably the biggest mistake, but it wasn't his making. It was probably Henry Kissinger's advice all along. However, in 1969, when he installed himself and he presented the idea to the world, he said that China couldn't be left isolated. A country with such a history had to be kept in contact and part of the global economic structure. And you can understand that this is from this moment onwards, so from 1972, when eventually Nixon manages to arrive in China after there is a visit by Henry Kissinger that prepares the way, then at that point, what happened is that they get closer and closer. Chiang Kai-shek, who was instead the founder of really one of the leading figures, he was restricted to the island of Taiwan, you see. So the Republic of China started and maintained its control over most of China after the revolt of 1911 until 1949. After that, it was kind of shrinked and it became Formosa, Taiwan, the island that basically was in the hands of Chinese Freemasons, or the Hongmen, who at the same time, though, moved their operational headquarters, so let's say the criminal arm, which is the triads and all that, from Shanghai to Hong Kong. And from Hong Kong, they were free to continue, of course, as there was the British in charge of Hong Kong. And then, of course, the Americans attempted in the 50s, after seeing that Mao Zedong had become a threat, after seeing that the Chinese communists were, of course, now not anymore, once they dismantled the Soviet Republic of China and they failed, when Mao Zedong eventually reinstalled and managed to take control, he founded, of course, the People's Republic of China that we all know. So the first experiment actually failed because he was rebranding a Soviet style, while instead when he took control in 1949, he, at that point, was creating a Chinese style of communism takeover. And that Chinese style of communist takeover cost millions of lives to the Chinese people, because what happened was a reckless way of dealing with things that didn't manage to really bring food on the table of the Chinese people. And it brought them to a level of starvation in which at one point they actually didn't only consider, but practice eating their own children.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that was like the failure. But then if you think about it, it comes in their aid what is supposed to be an anti-communist, Nixon. But Nixon at the same time is a member of the Bohemian Grove with Henry Kissinger. They're both members of the Bohemian Grove. The Bohemian Grove is very close to the Skull and Bones. The Skull and Bones had been dealing with China forever. And in fact, in 1974, they would send George W. Bush and Barbara together to Beijing when, after the deal was made in 1972, Nixon went to China. Now, he arrived in China and he spent a few days in China. He met 4 times with the premier there, but only once with Mao Zedong. Because Mao Zedong was not even the premier. He was considered like the father of the nation, an almost godly figure. And the strange thing is, if you see the newsreel run by the American media back then, you can hear the level of, it was like, this honor was only given to Nikita Khrushchev to meet Mao Zedong. And Nixon has been surprised and is now meeting our leader, you know. And even in the American newsreels, they were giving that kind of version of the things. It wasn't much different from what they were running in China. So it was already then kind of strange to hear Americans bowing down to a communist leader. I mean, Nixon gave him the possibility. Who cares? It was like they were really, even the American mainstream media was already presenting this Mao Zedong as some kind of godly figure. And why is that? Because you have to understand, Mao Zedong was one of the few people in the middle of this crisis that killed millions of people of famine in his own communist China, where he said things like, kill this kind of birds. And then all the farmers were killing these kind of birds because they thought they were harming the farms. And those birds were actually responsible for a series of things in the whole food chain. And he screwed up the food chain in China, simply because of inefficiency and crazy ideas like killing the birds of one kind because they disturb his idea of farming. And so the ignorance also was very, but militarily, no. Militarily, it was very strong from the very start. Mao was trained, of course, partly by the Russians, but they didn't do it simply by sending one of them. They sent this communist from Germany, from the Illuminati of Germany, called Otto Braun. Otto Braun was a spy, was a secret service operator, was somebody who will go back after 1949, later on he will go back to Germany, he will live in Eastern Germany, and of course he will work in close contact with the Soviet Union, but he was actually chosen by the Soviet Union to go and assist Mao to train his army. Mao was particularly clever in guerrilla tactics. he was actually the first one to champion guerrilla tactics at such a point that when in the 40s there was this brief liaison with between the America and China, American got inspired to start their own particular guerrilla unit.
Okay.
So it kind of even inspired the American forces. Imagine that, because the way that Mao Zedong was fighting this war was completely different from the ordinary. You have to understand that up until the Second World War, pretty much you had no involvement of civilians when it came down to warfare. Mao Zedong didn't care. He started what is known as the Long March that will eventually bring him to power. And this Long March was basically roaming the continent of China from one side to the other, trying to avoid, of course, the army of Chiang Kai-shek, the army of the Republic of China. And then at that point, there was, though, something that he did that was the winning solution. He decided to infiltrate after he had to, let's say, break the Republic, the Soviet Republic of China. And of course, the nationalists had a moment in which they were still strong. Well, he decided to infiltrate the actual commission of the revolutionary of Chiang Kai-shek and all those people, and the Freemasons of the Hongmen were infiltrated by communists. And of course, they themselves took control of everything and managed in the end to restrict, as I said. Imagine the person who really created this initial revolution that was supposed to be nationalist ended up with a little island called Taiwan. It's pretty incredible, but that's what happened. And at the same time, we have these Illuminati from Germany that worked for the Russians, that trained the Red Army, and trained also Mao to become the leader of tomorrow of China. And he became this leader, and up until his death, he was literally a god in China. And so nowadays we are suffering that bowing down and that acceptance of China within the world community that was forced onto us by people like Henry Kissinger, who of course are the main players of this new world order. They sold out eventually America. They gave China the possibility to even infiltrate America, infiltrate the universities of America, corrupt the whole political party, because gradually they managed to corrupt the whole Democratic Party, and that's it. It's a foreign force with hostile intentions, and the way they actually arrived to power was always by cheating, stealing, killing, and never respecting the rules of engagement. So this idea that we can have in the world community an acceptance of China like they are a normal country, well, we have finally seen with the present pandemic crisis what China is capable of doing, lying, and of course trying to avoid scrutiny and proposing in the end a different version of the events, and even accusing America of having created the virus because it fits their own sick narrative. So I hope that this gave you a clear idea of what we're fighting here.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you never hear any kind of criticism from anybody, like on the news or anything like that, speaking ill of China. I mean, it's you obviously infiltrated the schools. They've infiltrated the news. Nobody ever says anything bad about them. But I mean, there's a lot of people that come to school here from China, and I've heard, that they only come to school.
I hear you. I have heard. Yeah, sorry if I interrupt you, but I hear you very bad. I think it's a very important figure. I think that people need to know that the actual path that China embraced could have been very different if they accepted, first of all, what Sun Yat-sen did, and then what Chiang Kai-shek was trying to do, because of course they will have embraced the West, they will have become a different kind of nation. But what the Communist Party promised instead was lies upon lies upon lies and promises upon promises upon promises about a reality that of course now has partially brought millions and millions and millions of people, because the Chinese are it's basically part, it's a great part of the population of the earth. We have to face it, they are really numerous. But to actually bring them to a level of economic decency, and that is what the political party of today with President Xi Jinping is promoting. And he said it the other day. He said on Chinese TV that he's promoting a moderate, decent way of living. He's not saying we're going to have a great way of living from now on. A moderate. He's kind of like starting to play it down, because he knows, of course, the consequences of what is about to happen. He's trying to shield himself from criticism. You see, people have to also understand that the Communist Chinese Party is at times suffering intestinal conflicts. President Xi Jinping is the son of a very close friend of Mao, but at one point Mao kind of dropped him, and so then President Xi Jinping, the son, suffered in his younger years from a form of rejection from the leadership of the Communist Party that he then in turn reacted to, even psychologically, building up his force within the party, and now, of course, changing up even the rules so he can be kept for life, as a dictator for life, without the possibility of ever encountering another election from the Communist Party. But this is, of course, even a stretch by communist rules, because we have to understand that for the Communist Party up until now, the first thing is Mao Zedong as the father of the republic, of this communist republic, of the CCCP and the whole show. But after that, and of course with his lifelong controlling of everything, because he was the guy who had fought this battle to make China communist. But after that, the other people have followed, always have to more or less present the results to the Supreme Council of the Communist Party during the yearly meetings and satisfy their needs, if not suffer a defeat, and probably, even if, of course, the people who maintained the power in the end were always close to Mao Zedong. So they were kind of like still his friends or people that were close to him. Xi Jinping represents a new kind of China, still connected to the old elite of the Chinese Communist Party, and also somebody who has opened up officially to the Vatican, for the first time making the Vatican participant of a Catholic state-run religion, in which now Xi Jinping is plotting to persecute every Christian, taking away every cross, but leaving on the surface this Catholic Church that the Jesuits, of course, have now modeled more and more around communism, because that's what Pope Francis is actually doing. So I think it is very important to learn what is behind the history of China, because there has been certain errors that have been made, of course, by past governments, and errors that were made deliberately because they were the fruit of compromises, because the Illuminati had always controlled the opium trade, and the Skull and Bones and part of the Yale University setup was all constructed with opium money. So this link was always there, and between the Chinese Illuminati and, of course, the West. And they convinced in the end these people, of course, that were loyal to them, to open up America to the possibility that China could join the worldwide community and be like everybody else. They really constructed around China a fake image, and they helped doing that decade after Nixon set foot in Chinese territory, and he then opened these gates of, he actually said it. He was there with Kissinger on the plane. Right. And he talked about opening this gate to this, and then he also talked about, I remember during that trip, he said that the Chinese built this great wall, but we will have no walls with countries like China. We will be embracing them, because they are a great nation with thousands of years of culture. This is really, in synthesis, what Nixon said. He was very much responsible for what we are living today. I mean, it was the biggest mistake, and it was deliberately made not because Nixon, the politicians, or Nixon, the Republican, but because of Nixon, the member of the Bohemian Club that yearly goes to the Grove, and there they decided that it was about time to let China into the game. China could represent in the future cheap labor. They knew that could be the key for big business, and they actually, in the end, achieved what they wanted. And from that moment onwards, really, Henry Kissinger became the gatekeeper of this whole show. So whoever was in power in China didn't really matter, because there will be always Henry Kissinger. And still now, that he's still alive at the tender age of, I don't know, he's almost 100, the guy is still alive, and he's still a powerful player in this game. So I hope that people can understand that we need to study very well and very closely who gave birth to this satanic, because it's satanic. Communism is satanic. So I consider satanic also the communist China. Right. I consider satanic communist China. I consider them a godless country. But it's also true that if Joe Biden wins the next election, China will basically take over the whole of America. So it's like a nightmare. It really involves each one of us. And America needs to really responsibly vote to obtain and maintain the freedom they have.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned Henry Kissinger. I mean, he's still alive somehow, but
are in China. They are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Anything that goes through Zoom will eventually get you to be monitored, and they have easy access to this through Zoom. It's very much important and a priority for all the people who are doing alternative media now to realize that we can't compromise. So even when we're using an app, we're using a computer, we're using anything, we need to understand that if there is the hand of the Chinese, then we have to be very careful. And unfortunately today, most of this hardware, everything is built in China. So we need to really redirect and reconstruct a complete new economy living out to China and the possibility that they can ever interfere with their reality. This is very important because the Illuminati have decided to use China as a role model because they are the ultimate despotic dictatorship, the ultimate cruel nation. They are also the bigger liars in the world, the ones that have still the courage to go in front of the camera of the mainstream media after they pay them millions of dollars, talking complete rubbish, talking lies, and then because of the millions of dollars that have been paid by them, the mainstream media just goes along with so farce. I think that this election really will finally make us understand, make all of us understand, if we are still slaves to the old traditional media or the new media, which is the internet, who is really running the show. But mostly, if they vote for something like the Democratic Party, then there is something wrong here. There is something profoundly wrong, because everything they represent is anti-American. It's like voting for the Chinese Communist Party. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody in the right sense, in the right mind, will vote freely for the Chinese Communist Party. This is a party that senses everyday people on the internet. It kind of does facial recognition. It does basically social credit score. They are really the role model of the Orwellian superstate. And they also involve in building up the artificial intelligence, which is basically considered the critical, the most critical technological asset of the future.
Yeah, just like with that app.
And I must say that we have just across the border in Canada a big example of libtards who have really given their soul to China, and only recently, because they have been put under pressure by the United States. So we have seen what has happened with the arrest of that Huawei representative. But Canada, it's really a place that is very dangerous, because it has been infiltrated by communist China for a very long time. At the beginning of the 70s, Mao Zedong said, well, we have a step right on the back door of the United States. Right. Referring to Canada.
Yeah, Canada's
so really
lost.
lost, completely lost. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you talk about like AI. With that application TikTok.
Yes. Well, then you have also the various apps that are used to gather information. TikTok is only but one of them, but definitely the one that is considered strategically important, because it's the only Chinese one that has really made it here in the Western world. And if we add our personal information on TikTok, we end up giving it to the Chinese government. That means in the future they can have access to sensible data, but also understand our personal choices, our personal political inclinations, our religious inclinations. Through a few seconds on TikTok, they have the possibility through artificial intelligence to really scrutinize a reality, like, I don't know, I make an example, it can be the United States, but it can be any other country in the world. So TikTok seems just an innocent playground for people who just want to have a few seconds of laugh online. But unfortunately, it is representing the downfall of society that is also represented by Facebook. But Facebook, we know very well that now, of course, they are being grilled like the other day. We have seen Bezos and the whole show, and Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook and the other guy from Google, all grilled. But in the end, they are capable of blatantly lying. And in China, for example, social networks are considered a strategic asset of the state. Nothing that goes against the Communist Party is authorized on Chinese internet. And that was also one of the problems, also the beginning of the Wuhan crisis, because as soon as that doctor attempted to just expose the lies of the Communist Party, boom, he got arrested instead of actually exposing the truth. So the strategy of China is to control every aspect of your life, gather information, and identify you as simply a number in the system. For Mao Zedong, in communism, in Chinese communism, no one was essential, only him. I mean, it was almost like a cult, and it was a cult. It was, it was a step further from the Soviet Union. It was really the cult of personality of Mao Zedong, and he launched this concept, which still is reflected in Chinese society. Everybody else is dispensable. Now, President Xi Jinping, he thinks that he's the new Mao, the new dictator, the new this and that. But I heard from the last couple of weeks of Chinese news made from credible media that are, of course, not the ones that are used by the CCP, that there is problems within the Chinese party, that President Xi Jinping is actually starting to have a few problems because, of course, there is still some of the old friends of Mao and that were closer to Mao that are starting to wonder if it is maybe too much to give all this power to this person after this situation with the COVID-19 virus has diminished really the power of China. If you think about it, China is now less credible, is under the scrutiny of many nations that were actually almost infiltrated in their totality. Now suddenly they go against China, like Australia, for example. Right. And even Canada had to start, since the last few years, they had to kind of move back and take action because it was too obvious that they were being too close to the Chinese Communist Party. So in the end, I think that this virus has not necessarily helped President Xi Jinping, though he has, of course, married into the whole New World Order use of this virus, which is basically use this virus to gather and gather and gather more data. And that is really what this virus is all about, regardless of the economic consequences that are, of course, very obvious to everyone. And China is probably the less affected because they regard the human value a lot less than us here in the West. So they don't care if 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, whoever, they can have 1 million viruses. They can have the bubonic plague one day, swine flu the other, and another 10 viruses going along and killing hundreds of thousands, because in the end, nobody's essential. And they have millions and millions and millions of expendable human flesh. That's how they consider their citizens. And I think that the problem here is that we're starting to see that is a problem, of course, for the Chinese Communist Party, not for us, that maybe finally some Chinese are opening up to the idea that maybe communism is not the right ideology, is not the right way of life, but they have very limited possibilities of disagreeing, because the CIA has always failed when they have sent agents to try to move any any insurgents that could be effective against the Chinese government was deemed already impossible from the 50s. In the early 50s, the CIA sent, I think, 212 CIA agents. Of these 212 CIA agents, 101 were killed, the other one arrested. So, I mean, it wasn't a positive outcome for the CIA. And the only time they managed to do something that actually functioned in China was when they pulled out a few of those people that had rebelled in Tiananmen insurrections, and they managed to take them out of China before the Communist Party would kill them. So that was one of the few operations that they managed to do. But even between I remember seeing that between 2010 and 2012, so we are in the middle of the Obama era, well, there were something like maybe 18 CIA agents arrested, killed, and basically we don't hear that much about it because of the Obama era, because of the will of the Democrats to keep on in this mission that was also of Nixon, that was of Bush, because the thing is that it wasn't really the mission of a political party. The mission was created by Henry Kissinger, Bush, Nixon. Bush then kind of gave it to Clinton. Clinton gave the same mission, carried it on. It's like a torch, and carried on to Obama. And then at one point, there's a vacuum because then there is Trump, and it screws up all their plans. And so at that point, they have to find a solution. But the solution is to create something that can derail Trump presidency. And they tried with this pandemic. And where it comes from China. And so it's pretty obvious that they have tried all along to use this pandemic. And people, of course, use as an example the Spanish influenza when it comes down to the coronavirus. I would like to say that the Spanish influenza was also the result of a laboratory that then was kind of escape a lab, and then through the soldiers entered into civil society. I wrote all about it in my book here. In my latest edition of Volume 5, I have 140 pages dedicated to the to this coronavirus, to this Wuhan virus, however you want to call it.
Right.
And what I wrote up until now has been proven completely accurate, including the Wuhan lab where it was created, the Wuhan virologist which then disappeared after showing up at the US Embassy in Paris. We are in a situation which is unprecedented, so we don't really know what's going to happen with this virus, because once you let out this virus out of a lab, then you know it's always the product of a lab. It's not the product of nature. Right. Back in the days of the Spanish influenza, there were 4 waves of it. After the summer and the relaxing of the lockdowns, then it started again, and then they went back relaxing, then it started again, and then in the end, when it started the 4th time, it was finally depotentiating, meaning that it had lost the strength. Now, I can tell you from what I see in Europe that at least from what I have heard, the latest waves of coronavirus seem to be much less dangerous. The problem here, though, is that they are letting a new, more powerful strain in from North Africa. And this strain is probably a strain that has been worked out in a lab in Addis Ababa, where they opened a new center for the World Health Organization. China sponsored 300 million to have the center open, so imagine that. It got the guy you all now know, the head of the World Health Organization, elected after the prior head of the World Health Organization was actually a Chinese who came from the Chinese Communist Party. So they have taken control of these institutions of the United Nations for a long time. They are buying their way into capitalism to then destroy it. It's really a vicious and a crazy circle what they have created. But what I'm asking here is, don't the Democrats have also at heart the future of their own children? Because there is no future once China takes on the world. There is no future for America once China takes on the world. So I hope that sooner or later, even the Democrats will be forced to do the interest of the nation. Otherwise, you have to label all of them as foreign spies. Right. And I mean, that is a little bit far-fetched at the moment because they seem to be in control of half of America. So,
Well, the left is supposed to be
That's my
tolerant.
take.
That's what you always do.
Well, tolerance, you see, is built out of their passive aggression. They are the party of passive aggression. They are the party that builds up an image of rightness on a pedestal that is, of course, an artificial pedestal. So artificial pedestal means that they are not really believing in what they say, but they can do everything. Because at the end of the day, they go on their pedestal and they say, oh, we are in the right. This is this, this is that. When Obama talked at the funeral yesterday, I don't know if you followed it.
Yeah, that was bad. That was bad.
One of the things he said was absolutely incredible. I mean, he compared Black Lives Matter and Antifa, basically the people who are destroying cities all over the United States, to the father founders of the United States. And he compared them to Martin Luther King. I mean, complete and utter insanity. And so that gives you an idea of who we are coping with. So I have worked for many years in searching the ultimate Antichrist. I have written an article back in 2008, February 2008, in which I stated that Obama, who was not yet elected, would become president, and he was likely to become the next, and maybe the ultimate Antichrist. I actually wrote it on Renz.com, and you can find still the article on the bloodlines of Obama, because Obama at the same time seems to be just a guy out of nowhere, but he's also, if you go and see his bloodline, he's related even with Dick Cheney. He is related with various bloodlines of importance. So the mother kind of married him into the bloodlines a bit, while instead the father was obviously a product of Islam. And so we know from a prophecy that was made over 100 years ago in Russia that he fits all the various, the prophecy in Russia said that he will be a lawyer, that he will please people, he will actually preach peace and all that. But then he was actually lying. So when I saw Obama yesterday lying so blatantly and politicizing the funeral of course, somebody who helped in the rights, in the human rights of the Black people, who marched and talked also publicly, spoke with Martin Luther King next to him. I mean, of course, I hope we have to.
Herman Cain.
Sorry?
Herman Cain.
He was the one who died.
The one who died.
Sorry?
No,
hear you very well.
The one who died was Herman Cain.
The one who died, Herman Cain.
No, but Herman King is for the you mean Herman King is for the Republican Party?
Right. He's the one that he's the one that died.
Right.
No, I was talking about the guy who died from the Democratic Party.
Right.
Of course, Herman Cain was a completely different man. He died, of course, we know, of coronavirus. He was a Republican, Tea Party activist. He grew up in Georgia and graduated in a situation, probably he rose from poverty in the segregated South, of course. But it's like the Democrats are instead mourning for their own hero, as you know. And Obama was there to mourn for his own hero. So I am pretty shocked that Obama can use a funeral for a political thing. And it was the funeral of Lewis, who, of course, John Lewis is somebody who has, as I said, participated in some way also to the human rights movement for the Black people in a time in which they had no rights. So aside from that, using the funeral of Lewis to preach against your political enemies, I don't think that is, of course, a good thing. But of course, at John Lewis' funeral, we had Obama, Clinton, and Bush paying tribute all together. And it was very much what also Bush said that made me think these people are all together in this, trying to make America look bad. And that's not really what America is all about. So the neocons and the Democrats have always helped sell out America to the Chinese, destroy the foundations of America. And I've been saying this for the last 20 years, and finally people are catching up with it, because in 2006, I actually gave a series of interviews between 2006 and 2007 with Greg Zismansky, in which I explained how the Illuminati were basing their whole philosophy and their whole future government on the Chinese concept. So I was at that time maybe a bit prophetic, but I guess the people now are catching up with it.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely.
You
spoke about the Vatican. How deep is China into the Vatican?
How deep is China into the Vatican?
Okay. I have written about it in this book that I'm going to show you. Here we are. It's volume 4 of my Confessions, because it's a story that goes back almost 500 years. It started in 1541, when the Jesuits were formally launched and accepted in 1540 by the Vatican and launched their missions. And of course, what Ignazio Loyola did, the first thing he did was to send his closest disciples to China, India, Tibet, and basically Matteo Ricci arrived in China. He entered the imperial court, and he became part of the imperial court. Imagine that, a Jesuit comes from Italy, who left Italy, blessed by Ignazio Loyola, managed to arrive and actually work with the emperor. That's how the Chinese controversy started, because the Jesuits started to get closer and closer to the religions that were practiced in China, and then they picked up on these rites and they wanted to bring them back to the Vatican, and they proposed these rituals to 7 different popes, but 7 different popes basically told them to screw themselves. And that's great, because fortunately we didn't have this the acceptance of some kind of weird Chinese rite. But at the same time, now instead that the Jesuits have finally taken over the Vatican in 2013, from 2013 onwards, the CCP, the Chinese government, has made sure that the Chinese Communist Party gives the Vatican every year at least $2 billion. And they have bought out the Catholic faith by doing that.
It's crazy. I mean, I don't understand how they can have so much sway in the Vatican. It's crazy.
Well, the Vatican, you see, the money had to come from somewhere, and the Vatican has always been very opportunistic from the very early days of their foundation. So I guess they didn't really do anything new. They always had the people either from a royal family or the other in Europe, in some way financing them. It was the Spaniards, it was the Portuguese that were, of course, Catholics, that poured into the Vatican gold on gold on gold, and Jesuits who became very powerful in South America. They stole all the gold of the Inca, the Aztecs, and God knows what. So now that the Chinese are so powerful, they own the US debt, they have basically control over so many US politicians, and at the same time they control even the infrastructure for a lot of the products that are consumed here in the United States of America. Well, I mean, it's like the next thing they want to do is to construct a base on the dark side of the moon or something like that. And actually, they are thinking of doing that. And Elon Musk is even joining the party, probably. and they're going to do that with Russia. So finally, Russia has, in a way, got back what they invested in. Russia has always been very close to China, and they have this closeness because they were the ones who really, like I said earlier on, 10 years after the foundation of the Republic of China, launched the first communist base in China that gradually expanded. I mean, it was actually called a communist base, and they actually launched it from one specific town in China and then expanded to various towns. And it's like a virus. Communism is a virus, and China has been sick with this virus for way too long. And I think that the patient is irremediably sick, and they will never be healed from it. So now the problem is how we're going to be healed from the Chinese communist virus in all its forms. And I'm not talking only about the virus simply because the virus is what's happening now. No, I'm talking about communist China as a virus in many different ways, economically, politically, religiously, by destroying all the religions that are in their way, by crafting a new version of Christianity. The persecution of Christians in China is a reality.
Right.
And for us in the West to accept all that means that we are really in the end times.
Yeah, you can't be a Christian and vote Democrat.
Vote Democrat.
This doesn't mix.
Well, on that one, you are completely right. You can't be Christian and vote Democrat because they are demons. And actually, I have labeled them in my book Demoncrats. So it's pretty clear where they want to go. There is another book that I wrote, which is very important, which is this one. And it's volume 6.66, which is actually giving you the story instead of how the Jesuits are involved with the very foundations of the World Wide Web and the artificial intelligence takeover, which is, of course, run with China. China is working to become the biggest AI operator in the world. They want to do that by the year 2030, because that's when everybody really in the business knows that by 2030, the AI will be in such a position of dominance with respect to us humans that whoever has the most powerful AI rules the world.
Right. Why is it always seem like the Jesuits are in the middle of everything?
Hello? Sorry, but I can hear you trying on Zoom. Access with your podcast for all the patriots.
Right.
And hopefully we manage to next time. I mean, maybe we can have you on through the use of StreamYard without going through Zoom in any way.
Right. I apologize. Yeah, we're having some serious issues right now.
It seems like the signal guy.
Let's see. I don't think can you hear me there? Yeah, we're having some serious issues, technical issues here. Well, sorry about that, everybody. We're going to definitely have to have Mr. Zagami back on. He just couldn't hear me at all. So we're definitely going to have him back. I apologize for that. We're having some serious issues. I guess that's what happened. Like he says, when you speak ill about the Chinese, they just try to shut everything down. But yeah, I mean, I didn't get to go into his books and things like that like I had wanted to before we started. We were having some issues from the start, but yeah, you guys please check out his book, Confessions, Volume 666, The Age of Cyber Satan and Artificial Intelligence. Yeah, you can find Mr. Zagami also, who is a regular contributor to InfoWars. He's also one of the founders of Italians for Trump and Trumpiana de Italia, the first Trumpian organization out of US, created to support the election and later the work of President-elect Donald Trump. Yeah, it's like I mentioned, you guys can find him on YouTube as well. He has his YouTube channel, Leo Zagami Channel. You can find him on Twitter as well. Or you can find him on his website, leozagami.com, for any other information you need. You can find his books on Amazon as well. But like I mentioned, his website, leozagami.com, is where you can find most of his articles, or pretty much all of them, actually. You can find all of his work. He's also streams all the time live on Twitter, and on YouTube as well. But I really apologize. We definitely had some serious issues going on here, and we'll have him back on again here soon, so we can go ahead and finish this interview the right way. But like, if you guys need to find us, you can find us as well. YouTube, if you're watching us right now, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon as well, and also give us a thumbs up. Maybe not this episode because it was pretty much crap, and I apologize. But you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio, Truth Defender Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Defender Podcast, Instagram at Truth Defender Podcast, as well as Facebook, Truth Defender Podcast as well. You can go ahead and send us an email. If you have any questions for myself or our guests, we can go ahead and get that out to them. You can find us at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. Once again, I'm extremely sorry. I was really looking forward to this interview, but we just had some serious issues. We'll have to get that resolved, and we'll get him back on for another time and do another interview with him. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate you coming out and listening to whatever you could here. Everybody stay blessed and stay frosty. Have a good one.